And there's a bunch of different ways of getting around not seeing your neighbors or hiding a spa. We have, because of the growth up here, I can't tell you how many times I've had people come in and go, I had a hot tub in my backyard for 15 years and now I have neighbors and didn't before. So what can we do? Or yesterday, somebody came in with pictures of her neighbor's firewood in carts in her backyard. And she's like, I'm not allowed to have a fence. How do I hide this? I don't want to look at her stuff. Not everybody's as polite as everybody in this greenhouse. She was kind of colorful in her description of her neighbor, but we don't need to go there with that. So if there's, try and save some questions unless you're of the ilk where I'm going to lose it if I don't spit it out, then we'll go ahead and answer those. And but a lot of times the people online can't hear it, so I'll try and remind myself. Johnny's going to remind me to repeat the question, so it's not like making anybody seem silly. I just want to make sure, A, I understand the question, and B, the people online can really hear it. So inside, I'm just going to launch, and I'm going to start with something that's with the new construction and stuff like that. One of the things we don't consider a wall when we already have a wall. But I was at somebody's house the other day, and I moved up here from Phoenix, and we had concrete block walls. That's what they had. And he referred to his as a prison wall. And I just didn't really put that in yet, but that's how he felt. So that's what it becomes. You walk out and you see that. It's awful hot. And that becomes a problem. The reflective heat for when you want to plant in front of it becomes a problem. So how do you cool that down and make sure that you don't see a wall? And I needed this, and we're moving stuff around. So I don't really advocate wood for trellises up here. It doesn't hold up very long. It's not a really good support system, and the vinyl's kind of hard to keep it the right color. It also gets brittle on you. And when you go real decorative, like an arbor or something like that, and you do it out of metal, the whole idea is to have the plants cover it. So you're spending on ornamental. This is not necessarily an ingenious idea of Kevin's. It's just something that I came up with and I've used several times. I've had 3 houses since I moved up here 6 years ago, and all around the town. And so I'm familiar with the soils and the areas. This is called cattle pen, and you can see it doesn't roll up. You're not going to find it rolled up in fencing and stuff. It's for making pens for hogs and cows and stuff like that. It's real solid and very geometric. It's sold at Tractor Supply on the side, like 13 feet by either 36 or 50 inches. And what I'll do is I will tack this to the concrete block wall a little bit off the ground. If your block walls are 7 foot or something like that. So instead of sticking it in the ground here, I've actually cut some ends off and I use it for tomato stand. So instead of a cage, I'll put that in the middle of my tomato bed. You have beans and stuff like that to tie up to. And the holes are big enough to where you can reach inside, reach from either side. But stuck on your wall, planted with some of our crossvine. This is one of my favorites. This is actually a cross of honeysuckle, and I don't know if it's trumpet or not. I apologize, I meant to look that up for y'all. But this has an appendage that reaches out and grabs a hold of stuff, unlike most of your other vines. Honeysuckle does not have that. This is mostly evergreen, but you can make your concrete block prison wall disappear, and it will cool your yard off. So you can put some of this in. You don't have to do the whole thing. You could buy this, cut it with whatever you got handy. It's going to need bolt cutters or a grinder, and you could just do panels if you want. You don't, or you can soften a corner. It's a really good product, and it follows that wall sort of concept. You can use it if you want a little bit more control over your wall. Do the 50-inch and put it in between plants or in between posts. and put grapes on it. Something that you want to be able to get to. Honeysuckles, there's a lot of different things that you can create a wall with some structure and not have to worry about the structure falling apart on you or spending a lot on it. I've forgotten what I paid for it, but I've built 20-foot by 20-foot gardens with that as the outside structure. And then inside, I'll have it running in for beans and stuff like that. Just really hardy. It's not going to disintegrate in our lifetime. So that works really well. When you're trying to build a wall or a screen, okay, there's a difference. Screens are, I know that there's a bunch of chairs back over there with a tarp, but I'm going to see the stuff that's in front of it first. So I still know it's there, and if I look real hard, I can see it, but I don't really see it. It's not a focal point because of the stuff I have planted in front of it. And that will allow you some sort of a little bit more control over your design element. You don't have to go all evergreen when you're just doing a screen, because you're going to see the tree or the shrub in front of it. Much like you're not really going to pay attention until I point it out to you, my power box, just because this stuff is in front of it. And it doesn't have to be a solid wall. You just want something to distract from that. So consider that. That's one of your considerations going into your product selection. So you're going to say, do I want to block 100%? Is it my hot tub or is it just my neighbor's pile of wood? There's a difference in that. Then you want to take into consideration the height that you're going to want it. A lot of, with the topography we have here in some of the neighborhoods, I'm here and my neighbor's up here. And so it's really difficult for me to block almost anything because the start that they have on me on elevation. So that becomes something else. So I want to have a little privacy in a little area, then that's, you just have to take that into consideration. So how high do I want it to get? Then you want to look at how long of a distance do I want to block? And in my situation, my backyard drops off. There's non-developable area behind me, but on the other side of the ravine is another row of houses. And if they wanted to, they could see in my backyard. My closest neighbor below me, I'm just looking at his roof. So that all works out, except for I just want the big sky. So I'm planting this. I have this in my yard. This, and I encourage you to look at the growth habit of this one elm. So Chinese wireless Zakova elm. And he grows wider than taller. So he's going to get 20 foot tall, but he's going to go 25 or 30 feet wide. He just comes up and does this beautiful umbrella. Well, I can see my big sky from my porch, and I can see underneath it in the whole ravine, but it just perfectly blocks out the view of the houses across the hill. And it's not, I don't think anybody's looking with their binoculars in my kitchen or anything like that, but it's, you look at how the plants grow is the point. This is going to act as a screen for me. I'm going to be able to see underneath it. I'm going to be able to see over it. Doesn't do anything about blocking my view except for give me a little bit of cool green. It's actually one of my favorite plants I planted in most of my yards. This other is that magnolia is another good example. That's an evergreen plant up here, the southern magnolia. 25 foot tall, 20 feet wide. When it gets going, it's really robust. It has these great big leaves on it, and it's a showstopper. When it's blooming, it'll have this lemony smell to it. It does a lot of screening for you, because it is a focal point right up front as opposed to what's behind it. You're no longer concerned about being able to see the dock or the other trees for sale. You're looking at the magnolia. It's a really, really neat product. And then there are places and times. And then you want to consider, so we got height, then you want to consider distance. How long do I want this wall or block or screen to go? And that's going to determine the number of plants you want. Because on your plants, you're going to read the tickets and you're going to see how tall and how wide. So this is a Pyracantha, and it's spec'd at 10 foot tall and 8 foot wide. That's a big piece of green. Evergreen, dark green, dark red berries. That's a really cool contrast. But this is not just a screen. This you will not be able to see through. You cut some of that back. If there is a problem with this or a negative to it, it's got some thorns. And some people, anything that blooms is going to have bees and butterflies and everything else. Some people that's a really good thing, and some people just don't want any bees. That's even if you put out plastic plants that have flowers on them, they're going to come for the color. So that's a hard one to address. But this is one of my go-tos for big, dark green block the view. Is a pyracantha, but the point here is 8 foot wide. You don't want to put it on the very end of your sidewalk if you have a walkway and then the place to plant, because you have 4 feet. In the middle of that 8 is 4 feet. Picking up and putting down, so you got that much space when you're counting how many plants you need. If your next plant is another 8 foot wide plant, say you're going monochromatic and you're just going to plant a row of this, then you've got 4 foot from the edge of your walkway, 4 foot and 4 foot. You can plant them 8 foot apart, and you won't be overbuying on plants. Personally, if you buy a couple extra plants, that's how we all live at Waters Nurseries, by selling plants. So it's a good thing. And I'm one to I plant thick and then I thin out because I want it now. And yeah, come on over and see my yard in 10 years. No, I want it to look good right now. So I'm a little bit more about planting it. So you've got your height. You want to read your elevations. You want to take a look at whether or not you want anything to be deciduous, like this elm. Or is it okay if it loses its leaves? Look how distracting this Rosa Sharon is. Well, he's going naked in the winter. That's just going to be sticks. But all summer long, you're not going to care about what's behind it, right? Because you're going to see it. And that's something that you need to look at as far as how much room you have. So you've got your length and your height doesn't really address the amount of space you have to create this wall or distraction. And if you go deep, instead of just putting everything in a nice flat row, you have room for a little bit more play on what you plant. And that will bring me a little bit to selection. If you have something that's evergreen, you can afford to put something that's going to go dormant in front of it and be a beautiful distraction. But when this thing goes to sticks, these two are going to be solid green still in the wintertime. This is called a waxleaf privet, and that is his winter look. He is solid green, just a really, really formidable plant, as opposed to the red tip Fittonia, the ever popular red tip Fittonia. That's fine. Oops, I guess I'm showing my prejudice. I didn't bring one up, but see that? That's a really nice thing. Well, if you have the space, then you can offset things when you plant. You can do some of your evergreens along the back with some space, and then you can put some of your deciduous stuff in front of it if you have this kind of room. So eventually you plant these to where they're eventually going to grow together, and they're going to be your backdrop for your color. So this, it doesn't matter if these guys lose their leaves. I mean, it might be nice. Or you could do this as well, where you put some big stuff. These blues are some of my favorite, the blue cypress, and some evergreen in front of that. This is a really effective wall, and it's a wall, not just a distraction. Those are two different kinds of blue cypress. The one on the left that's in the back a little bit, I encourage you to take a look at it when we're done. That's a new cultivar. It's a columnar blue cypress. Your regular Arizona cypress that is blue will just go wherever the light takes it. but that columnar has still got some independence about his shape. He's not quite so perfect as a Italian cypress, but he is going to be a really nice end cap or centerpiece, directional in your wall. This blue with that dark green and your red berries is a showstopper. And what we've done before is set up what I call blinds because of the way they lay. And the house is here, and this is a true example. Up off of Williamson Valley, they could see the planet. 15 years ago, they declined $100,000 it would cost them to buy that 3 acres that was between them and Granite Mountain. And so somebody came along and bought that for $450,000 and built a mansion, and it's a beautiful structure, and it's a couple hundred yards away, so it's not really offensive, except for this bathroom is floor to ceiling glass in the corner. Another beautiful home, but it's like you get out of the shower and there's that house. However far away it is, it's there. And what we did was we put a blue and pyracantha, and then a blue, and a blue and pyracantha, and a blue, and a blue and pyracantha. So when you're looking out of here, this is 14 feet. This is almost 8 feet. These are 4-foot little mini walls. It's all lava out there, so it's pretty hard to get in and out of. But you can clearly walk here and not have anything. But from here and here, it looks like a solid wall. You don't see the distance here because they overlap each other. And but you've got this intentionally planted close together, these blues hugging this dark green, and when those berries go red, it's a showstopper. It's really a pretty wall. And yeah, so there's ways of making walls if you have the space. The other thing to consider is height of each one of the products or plants that you pick. So you can pick dark green for the back and come forward with something that's a little bit more colorful. This is this pine, the Austrian pine, also called black pine, and the Oregon greens. If you trim them, they won't just split. They'll put on 4 or 5 branches. They'll get so thick you cannot see through them. And they're a great wall. You can see all of these are new. When this gets too skinny in the middle, either one of these, they just cut the top of it off, and it'll put off these huge levels of branches. All this is new growth. You'll get a foot a year off of these trees in the ground. You see how thick that is? That's not the screen. This is a hot tub plant because it's the softest needles on the conifers. Rubbing up against it is not offensive. It's a really big, but it's a big tree. But you can put something that's going to be deciduous in front of this. If this is part of your back wall, this is one of the euonymus. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is a cotoneaster, but there is a euonymus also that are called autumn blaze or fire. This is called autumn inferno. It will go naked in the winter, but on its way out, it's a bright red bush in front of that guy, or even in front of these. So you'll have, how's that? This is called a
Vanderwolf.
Vanderwolf, thank you.
Vanderwolf?
Vanderwolf pine. There's one that was big I didn't want to bring over. I've got 4 or 5 of them left too. It's a showstopper. It's a Scotch pine columnar. And I saw one the other day in a neighborhood that was probably 25 foot tall. But it's a Scotch pine that just, it's not like a Fat Albert or one of the others that looks like a Christmas tree. It's just this big boom column. It's just, they're stunning with the cones on it. And the Vanderwolf has a cone that is like that big. it's a wreath maker. They're beautiful, beautiful trees. So what you want, you can consider if you have the room, and then if you have the room, go ahead and have some variety. Get a Vanderwolf, get a black or an Austrian pine. The Oregon green is a cousin to this, and you'll see it when you're walking around, except for it looks like a bottle brush. The needles hold close to the stalk more. But all of these trim so well, you can keep your natural shape towards the house and lop off the back every once in a while, and it'll be so thick you won't be able to see through it, and the back is, for your neighbors to see. It doesn't make it look bad. It's just a different look. It's not quite as organic. The other thing that I like to do is I'm not on the monochromatic, the solid walls of boxwoods. And you don't have to, it doesn't have to be, we'll go back to height. You can get a boxwood or one of these others that you want to build a hedge out of, and all you need is a separation of the yard. It doesn't have to be blocking. It's just this is where this part of the yard ends and that part of the yard begins. So it can be a 4-foot hedge or a 3-foot hedge. But in that, it'll be a whole lot easier for you if you read the hybridization of the plant. So you don't want a green giant boxwood that wants to be 8 foot, but you only want 3 feet out of it. You're just going to have to cut it every year. That's all. But at some point, it's nicer just to have the one that's hybridized. This is a columnar boxwood. And his growth rate will be on the back. He wants to be 9 foot tall, but he's only going to be 2 foot wide. So it makes a really nice end cap or turning of a corner, or in the center, you could do columnar stuff with your evergreens or your deciduous, so that you're not so monochromatic. And the beautiful thing about mixing it up a little bit with your diversity of plant types is it stops the diseases. Now, grubs are not that selective, so you have to be careful about that. But this time of year, you're seeing fungus on different plants, and that spreads real easy from plant to plant. The red tip Fittonia are notorious for getting the white stuff on, the white fungus on this time of year. It's hot and humid, and it's just one of the few times of the year that we have actual humidity. But it'll spread a whole lot easier unless you have something breaking it up. Now, there's times where you just want it to be solid and all evergreen. You could stake a pyracantha and run, boxwoods. You could do, but this, for example, again, I see these all the time in balls. People, I don't know, the Dr. Seuss trimming school or something, but the first thing you do to keep the shape is you cut off the new growth because it doesn't look like a ball. Well, the new growth is where your blooms are. So you'll see these real compact plants with flowers kind of in them because they're just determined to bloom in spite of your behavior. And but all of that lack of breeze and stuff that should go through this plant causes it to be susceptible to fungus and stuff. This will get 10, 12 foot tall, these Rose of Sharon, depending on the species, of course. But take into consideration, they're going to go naked in the winter. So you might want them in front of something that is evergreen so that when they are, you still get your block. A couple of these I brought out specifically for them being evergreen without being conifers, because that's the first thing that we think of, or I do when I think evergreen. I'm thinking it's got to have needles on it. When there are some that are pleasant needles, but this is a silverberry. You see his silver underside? They come out sort of metallic looking, and then they go dark green. This is its winter look. This is an evergreen 8-foot shrub that isn't a conifer. Great plant to make a row of hedges out of, or to mix with stuff that is going to go dormant. See the contrasting color there? That's a really pretty plant. This is your smoke tree. or smoke bush. The difference is the hybridization on one of them wants to be 5 foot tall, and one of them wants to be a tree. So, but you'll have that pink hue of the flower all over it. You can have a nice dark solid green. That's got some silver to it. I like this because of the contrast on the bark. Your Manzanito can do that for you if you can find the big ones. That's point leaf is the big one, real indigenous, real hardy. You have the cinnamon bark and the dark green leaf. You can do it. You know, have your backleaf privet as your main component. And it doesn't matter if they blend in so much to where you just occasionally have some of the purple coming out, because when the purple blooms, you're going to have this pink smoke on top of this that's going to be thrown off by that dark green. It's a stunning combo. Those privet actually smell nice when they bloom. It's a white flower, and they'll have a little purple berry on them. The birds will take care of it. Really, really nice product. This one's cousin. This is, and again, part of it is my personal opinion or my personal preferences. I have dogs. I don't do boxwoods. They can't handle dog urine. They'll just kill a big or turn a big spot brown. And I have enough trouble trying to keep them off of my fake grass. I'm not going to teach them to not pee on my shrubbery. But so that's a limitation. These two silverberries. This is called Gilded Edge. The euonymus has a yellow and green leaf on some of them. There's also a white and green leaf on some of the other euonymus. Those are considered evergreen, and they're nice and thick and dark. This is one of the few yellow that I will recommend. And I say that because the pH in our soil and our water is out of kilter. You have to be adding acid, a different class, but to keep your dark green and your yellows right, to have your red on your red tip red and your red on your maples in the fall red, you've got to acidify your soil. This doesn't seem to mind going a little alkaline. And it's most of the yellow variegations look sickly if you don't have your pH just right. You can go white in your variegation, but not yellow. And so I can get by with skewing my prejudice on that by calling this gold. It's called Gilded Edge. And this one you don't have to worry so much about. These two are so durable that I don't advocate turning the water off after year one, but you're just going to grow slower. You know, it'll take whatever it can, and you're going to have to water them some. But yeah, they're very, very durable. Non-conifer evergreen. Non-conifer evergreen. Your honeysuckles and your crossvine. The crossvine will lose some. The Japanese Paul's honeysuckle, which is your very traditional yellow and white. This is almost evergreen. It just stops growing. But whatever is there keeps most of his leaves. But you'll get 5-6 feet of growth of this in a year in the ground with the right kind of food. It'll just go boom on you. And they'll grow and rest and bloom and grow and rest and bloom all while it's hot. Great plant if you want to put it on something. His cousin is the, I didn't bring one up, but it's called purple. It's a Japanese Hall's purple. And it just has, the stalk's going to be, have some purple to it. And instead of just yellow and white, the flower's going to have some purple in it. But every bit as winter durable. So take that into consideration. That makes a really nice piece of, they need something to hold on to, and they don't have that tentacle that the crossvine does. The other is a very popular one, of course, is your trumpet vines. The trumpet vines use a cleat, and it's a cluster of roots that will bore into your stucco or the masonry on your block wall or the concrete in between the cinder blocks. They'll actually cleat onto that. So that you have to be careful with that, but it just goes completely naked. But much like a wisteria, the stalk is really cool looking once it gets old. And as soon as they start coming out, they bloom all summer long. But you could see where you could have something columnar, something for the honeysuckle to hold on to, something columnar, and you can create a non-geometric, very geometric space to block. This is great work for hiding a shed, hiding your propane tank, hiding your neighbor's propane tank, that kind of stuff. This is another one that is just, when it's in bloom, it's a real show off, and and it has its fruit on it, it's a real show off. And then when it's naked, it's just not all that neat looking. And that's the pomegranate. But this particular pomegranate can get 8 and 10 foot tall. It's a big plant. The flower is just this enormous orange on it, and it's just, and then you have the fruit. Delightful plant in the right spot, like in front of something evergreen. But it will get it by itself. It makes a really, really nice distraction. Because it is very distracting. But you got to consider your colors too. What color is your house? What color is your trim? Cotoneaster work really well. There's several of them that are evergreen. A lot of they're known for the low ones that mound. This one will look like a round bale of hay if you leave it alone. It behaves like a pyracantha, but it doesn't have any thorns. It's got it's molts. It'll put on leaves as it's losing leaves, so it's never really completely naked. It gives you a really neat auburn and almost blood color in the fall. The leaves do. It's got the little round clumps of berries and flowers, or flowers then berries, like the pyracantha does. It's a really neat plant. It will get eaten by the deer and stuff if there's nothing else to eat. But once everything else is out and it doesn't have anything to, it's competing with all the other stuff. It must not taste very well. This is a Cotoneaster as well, and this is going to give you the bright red color in the fall. But it's another really dense, upright bush. It makes for a great structural wall. Once it gets 4 or 5 foot tall and you keep cutting it back, it becomes a very dense piece of product. It's neat. But I brought those specifically to show you that there are evergreen Cotoneaster and non-evergreen Cotoneaster, and then if they're not all that little bitty nappy thing that's in people's yard. That if you decide to take the time and cut that, it responds really well to just being whacked severely. You can make it. One neighbor up a Copper Basin had it looking like waves, and I thought, oh, it's frail. I just got up here, my 20-pound rat terrier standing on it. It's not even bowing. It's just like that was stiff, and so that's a lot of fun. But again, non-monochromatic, not just because it's just solid, but because you're going to stop your diseases and stuff. And then don't, if you have this broom and that's what you want, cut them into balls. But know that if you let the air go through some of this stuff, then you're going to be less disease prone, certainly less molds, because the wind's going to be able to go through it. And you're going to get your blooms. A lot of this stuff blooms on the new growth. And you'll end up with fewer flowers. I can't say you won't have any. It just won't be as productive for the plant. But don't be afraid to mix them. What you want to do is you decide, do I already have a wall and I want to cover it with something like some vines and mix it up and then put some of the cool stuff in front of it? Or do I, if you have a corner and you're playing off of it, then you might want to just do something columnar in the corner and then come toward the house. And you can separate the spaces with something else columnar. The other thing to get out of a frame of mind on your vines, I'm all about having 3 or 4 different kinds of honeysuckles and stuff like that on the same fence, so that when one's dormant, the other one is blooming. When I just have berries off of my pyracantha, then I have my trumpet vine in bloom. There's all kinds of ways of mixing this up. I'll put grape in so that so I'll just have something to eat while this thing is blooming and grape, but I won't plant grape all by itself. I don't need enough of it. I don't make wine anymore. So, but you don't be afraid to mix the stuff on almost in the same hole. You can get by with really cool contrasting things. I had a set of dividers amongst a condo or townhouse area up in Sedona. And what we did was we mixed the pyracantha and Joseph's Coat grows. So the pyracantha is your dark green evergreen backdrop with the red berries, and then you have the Joseph's Coat, which comes out one color and starts changing colors as it's exposed to light and air, and that would lose all of its leaves and be completely dormant in the wintertime, but you had your dark green background. So the color on that wall was this dark green with these reds and yellows and on the flowers of the Joseph's Coat. Pretty stunning stuff. And you knew there was a condo there or the pool, but you didn't see it. So pretty spectacular. Get creative, figure out how long of a space you have, where there's points. Is there a corner? Is there a spot where I want to accentuate? Do I want to start? Is this the middle? Use your columnar stuff for that. Build something structurally that you're not afraid to hide. You know, if you spend a lot of money on that wrought iron, it might, I just covered it up with a bunch of vines. So get creative. I've seen big arches made out of that, and it just covered with wisteria, and some would look at it as a real pain. You got to sweep up all the purple flowers. That's quite a joy for sweeping, getting underneath that. I've seen people take the fencing and make columns out of it and set it on top of a crossvine or on top of a honeysuckle, and you just have this column of green full of flowers, and it's stunning. I'm doing one right now. It's in Prescott Valley. It's got a cypress tree on it that's dead, and this cypress tree is like this big. So the first question was, how much to take out the cypress tree? Well, what we're doing is we're going up into the tree. We're leaving like 3-foot branches, 2.5-foot branches off, and we're covering the tree with trumpet vine. So it's sitting there next to the driveway, and it's going to be this big pillar of iridescent red flowers. And we're toying with, I build furniture, so I get a little bit off the chart sometimes. We're looking at whether or not they want to do some Dr. Seuss stuff where there's going to be little doors and windows built into the tree, like it's an elfin tree with the vines on it. But the jury's out on that. But if you go into Yavapai College and you see that carrion, those stone, the walls that they've made with wire and full of rocks, that's got trumpet vine on it. It's a showstopper. And even when it's dormant, you've got that really neat structure of the vines, the core base of the vines, with the contrast of the metal and the stone. It's beautiful in the winter, but right now it's starting to bloom. Pretty cool. So mix your mediums, mix your plants, and get creative. And if you have any questions about it, or you got some suggestions, bring in some pictures. Right now I'm here on Wednesdays and Fridays, and I'm happy to give you some time. So, any questions? Yes.
The
Vanderwolf.
Vanderwolf, what size width?
Oh gosh, it's a monster. So I would think it's 25 foot wide, 40 foot tall. This is the other thing to consider. This is a really great question because, and I know this is a rhetorical question. Please don't answer this. But I ask people, how old are you? You're getting a foot a year. This in the ground is probably 6 feet, right? Because you're taking a 2-foot bucket and putting it in the ground. So 6 feet minus 40 foot maximum height, 32 years. Are you planting it for yourself or your next purchaser? I mean, really, if you're going to go to Europe and you're going to water it and feed it really good while you're gone, it might be a surprise at how big it is when you get back 5 years from now. But if you're living with it, it's like you don't see the puppy grow up. It's just, so make sure you check not just the height and the width when you're looking at these plants, but ask somebody about growth rate. And we don't accuse the growers of embellishing or exaggerating. They're just writing the specs on the perfect growing environment that they create for the plant. It's not written by someone in Prescott. Just like when you go to DYI and you come and argue with me about the growth rate, you're probably reading somebody from Oregon or Pennsylvania or someplace, and not somebody in Prescott. We'll let you leave feeling like you're right, but you might not be. So just be careful on your growth rates.
Yes.
And full sun also, that's another.
Okay. Deck situation where you want to cover up someone else's growth. So you have basically no soil for if you were going to use in a potting situation, long pots. I mean, we could use different pots, but maybe a planter situation. What would you recommend? Would you recommend like the vines only in that kind of situation where you don't have the width?
So the question is, if I understand it, if you don't really have the ability to plant in the ground, you have the ability to put it in pots, and you still, or what?
Or planters.
Or planters, yeah. But you still want to block a neighbor's view or something like that. Yeah, that's all very doable. And what people don't think about is, again, something like this, because you can put something that will live in pots longer than the trees or the shrubs is the vines. And you can sit this in between your planters or in your planter and put your vines in there and get as high a big a wall as you want. And so with some support, some structural support, you can put two of these on top of each other. One of them is 50 inches is one of your options. So you've got some height. And yeah, it's all very doable. The trick with pots, is you want them as big as possible. You want them as thick as possible. You want clay. You don't want plastic or the composites. They break down a whole lot faster up here, and they're not as good at insulators. But some of the composites, like the old tires and stuff like that, that's a pretty good insulator. But the clay done right is the best for the roots. And again, you got to remember, if you put something that's this big in a pot this big, it's highly likely that the roots are going to get too cold over time and too hot. So as a quick aside to that, you can put things in a plastic pot and slide them down inside of a clay pot. And that will allow you to increase the size slowly. And that insulation, you will still have the airspace between the pot. You won't have your roots up against real hot or real cold because you'll have that airspace. Whatever you do, don't fill your pot with plastic, peanuts or old Coca-Cola bottles or something like that. Just buy dirt, okay? You invest in the plants, let them have dirt. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm building on the same question. I have two patios. So one's an upstairs balcony.
Yeah.
That has metal railing.
Yeah.
We've already affixed hardware mesh to it to keep the cats from jumping off.
Yeah.
And we'd like ivy for privacy screening or something like that.
Yep.
Something potted to give us privacy screen on that for balcony.
Yeah.
And then we have a downstairs one that's similar, but instead of 3.5 feet, it's 8 feet, and we could plant in the ground.
Yeah, well, both of those. The one caveat to doing things in pots and not versus planters is root rot is a problem up here because you have stuff standing in water. And there's a time to do that, to immerse something and let it soak up and let the dirt rehydrate. But on a balcony on the second floor, you're going to want to have some way of directing the runoff so it goes off the plant. And you want to water a couple of times to hydrate the soil appropriately. If you have saucers up there and to have enough dirt, it's problematic to try and pick up the planter and pour the water out. You don't want them standing in the water. You don't want them standing in the water in winter, and you don't want them standing in the water in the summer because you'll create root rot and you'll create problems when the water freezes. very doable.
So you're saying you'd recommend railing mounted planters instead of pots?
No, you just get your pots, put them on your deck, and make sure that you, if you put them in a saucer and put a little shim on the inside, just cut the outside of the saucer open.
So it drains off the
Yeah, drill a hole in it and get them to drain away. So you still don't rot your deck unless you've got a concrete or Trex. You want to be aware of that. But that's all very doable. But know that it's not like an English ivy. It's kind of toxic. The cats are going to taste it, and then they're not going to. They have to eat like 4 plants to really hurt them. So if you're not starving them, and if you have a catio, you're probably taking pretty good care of them. So, but know that once you put something like that up, you're not going to have. You're going to create a lot of shade. So it's not like you're going to have beautiful potted plants on the inside. After you put a vine or something on there, that's going to limit the amount of sunshine for other plants.
Last question on that topic. In terms of planting for that scenario, perennial, evergreens.
Yeah.
What plants would you recommend?
Well, it depends on if it's the sunshine that's hitting that screen originally. Because if it's real intense, then you can lean. I would lean more towards your honeysuckles. You can, which would be really great because you can then open up that. You're going to get that smell in your house. I've used this a lot for similar things. The jasmine. I've planted the jasmine on metal trellis on the outside of bathroom windows. Not only does it block eventually to where no one can see in, but most of the summer when it's blooming, you can open up your window and get the jasmine smell.
What about non-aromatic?
How's that?
What about a non-aromatic? My wife's really allergic.
Get the English ivy.
Okay.
It'll bloom, but you won't be able to tell.
Okay.
And there's a big leaf down there that can handle some shade. It will shade itself. It can actually, it's a lot. Initially, if you plant it in full sun, you're going to get some burnt leaves, but it will acclimate.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Question. So we have chain link all around the property.
All right.
Which is beautiful now. So it's 4 foot. I'd like to go up 6 foot with something. It could be the paneling too.
Yep.
What would you suggest that would grow well on that, stay evergreen?
So the question is, she has got a 4 foot chain link fence, at least for the backyard or part of the yard.
Front and back. There's a corner in the front that is problematic because it looks down on the neighbor.
I see. Is that why you want it taller?
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't know how tall we have to go because I see that I want to block that house in the corner.
Right. Well, there's ways of doing that. You can put. I had only my backyard had the. Was I allowed to put a fence up in this one neighborhood I was in, and it was where every critter that was in Arizona Parks and Wildlife was everything except for the bear. I saw his prints, but I never saw him. But I had it all, and I only put up a 4 foot chain link, and I put the honeysuckles on it, and I put 3 or 4 types of honeysuckles. So there were some that were evergreen, and that's why I can speak to that. But I also put in some of those flame that have a bigger, rounder flower or bush, leaf rather. So when one wasn't blooming, the other one was, and it just made really cool color. They'll mix with themselves and everything, but it's all fair game. If you have animals jumping that you don't want, you don't have to go up higher. You do a double fence. I don't know how else to describe it, but you go out 2 feet or so from your fence and put in rebar and just run a single wire on the rebar about a little bit higher than your chain link. And the deer will see it and they won't jump it.
We don't have a problem with that. Nobody's coming in the yard.
Okay. So height.
And then there were privet along the side fence. They're all dead. So I like that idea, but I don't know if they won't do well there.
Right. Well, then you go something taller, get some of the pyracantha. And what I do is I just leave that bamboo in it and I put 1 piece of rebar in there. And by the time the bamboo's gone, that rebar is taken over and the plant by itself will get 7 or 8 foot tall and just as big as you let it. And almost you can't see through it. You can extend the post on take off the cap on your chain link and tack weld some taller ones and either put up some more chain link or put up some wire and plant on it. Real easy. So you can do vines there, and on corners, plant something taller. Get something columnar. That this one in the corner here, take a look at it on the way out. This is your Arizona cypress blue ice. That's a columnar blue ice. And it's only going to get, that wide, 3 foot wide, but it'll go as tall as you let it. Really neat to have that on ends and some vines in the middle. Or if you just want some height, you can just do some of the cypress. Doesn't have to be the blue. You can do the regular cypress, but they'll grow as fast as you feed them. And people think, well, I want something that I don't have to take too good a care of. Well, there's plenty of that around after you get it established. But know that they're going to grow at the rate you feed them and you water them. So if you don't want to take care of it, you better buy big and take real good care of it for the first year, because you're not going to get a foot a year out of a pine tree that you don't water and feed. You just won't. Something else? Yes.
I have a question about honeysuckle. Do they grow in shade or just grow slowly?
Well, they'll get spindly. So, but a half a day is fine. My experience was a east-facing deck that was it was 10 foot off the ground, and after I rebuilt the deck with the Trex and stuff, because it was one of those where the old redwood you would fall through it if you weren't careful, but I wanted a place to store stuff underneath the deck, and I took this and made a metal frame out of it and put it underneath on the edge of the deck. And this, I planted my honeysuckles. And, but all they got was east. It was facing due east. And they got so thick, I could stand here and you would not know I was there if you were sitting on my sidewalk. And it was very, very effective. They were in the shade for, I think they got probably 4 hours of direct sunlight in the morning, and that was it. But I did a combination of the purple and the yellow and then the flame. And the flame would go completely naked, but it started blooming sooner. Yes, sir.
I have a neighbor that kind of looks at me while I'm in my living room, waves at me,
Yeah.
and it's really unsettling. I just moved here, and I'm getting ready to leave if I can't get some privacy. And I'm an engineer, so I can analyze this stuff until the ice age comes back before I decide what plants to get. Where would I reach out to get someone to just come out to my property and spec something out to buy? I can't wait for this to fill in.
Yeah.
To just spec out full grown, stuff and, have it done. I don't want to be, looking up at the sky, hoping it rains or hoping.
Oh, no, I got you.
I just,
You're
and I
willing to
love
point
gardening.
your path.
Where I came from, I was gardening and just really having fun, getting into it again. So maybe I'll do that, but I want to get this fence up first, and then, so I can feel comfortable. I can open up my windows and step out in my backyard.
So we have a gentleman here who's got the ability to do the gardening, but doesn't necessarily want to take the time to do it, or suffers from paralysis of analysis. Wants somebody just to come out and do it. Doesn't have a problem pointing and paying. And we have a list of preferred vendors, and those guys are people that we have kind of baptism by fire. If a lot of stuff they plant dies, we take them off the list, right? So we've got that, and I would look at how much you need. When you're looking at how to pick someone, this is actually a neat element to pay attention to. There's people with boom trucks, that top the trees around the courthouse. But if you pay for them to come out and plant one tree, you still are covering that overhead. And there are people with pickup trucks with landscaper on the side of them. They have no idea what they're doing, but they can dig a hole. So some of that is kind of weeded out through next door. And I have a couple of guys that have pickup trucks that have their act together. And that's minimal overhead. And that's who you might want. Then they look at, oh, this guy's been here for 3 or 4 generations and he's got a small fleet. That's like perfect for something like what you have. But I have that. And so just see me after we're done,
Thank you.
and I'll give you our preferred vendor list, and I'll pull a couple out of my phone that I use on my properties.
Thank you.
You bet.
And as far as the person to come out to the house and take a look at it and suggest what to put where if you want a DIY.
Well, most of those are, you can bring your plans in here and have somebody do it. And there are people that will come out and give you a consult.
Because of the light, front backyard, huge
Yeah.
sycamore.
It's really hard. I can't tell you how many times we hear it's not the watering when it's the watering. So it's good to have someone come out. We can tell you how to figure out if it's the watering, but yeah, it is. There are people that will do just a consult, and know this when you are looking at people doing things, what you're spending your money on. A good set of plans. It's not unreasonable for a CAD drawing to cost $2,500, and they'll put into it. You know, they should know the species that will grow here, the growth rates. They've talked to you about what works. They've seen the property. That's, if you have the money, that's probably worth it. But if the yard's already done and you just need a couple of things, put the $2,500 into the plants, and you're going to be so much farther ahead. You'll be able to buy larger instead of a bunch of little stuff and waiting. I see that frequently. I already spent all this money on drawings and I don't have a yard yet. Can't undo that. Anything else? Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Hope it was helpful. No monochromatic.